So would you say your gut microbiome influence your mood more than anything else?
I think that the answer is yes. And the reason why I say that is they have these bizarre studies that they've done where they take people and they inject into them something called lipopolysaccharide.
What is that?
All right, lipopolysaccharide is produced by bacteria that live inside of us, like E. coli. So we've all heard of E. coli, okay? So this is like...
They inject a disease inside of us.
So they're injecting this thing that you find in E. coli into a person's bloodstream.
Wow.
Okay? And then they track them over the next couple of hours. We're talking about humans. We're not talking about mice right now. Mm-hmm. And they see what happens. And here's what they find. Number one, because this bacteria has entered into the bloodstream, they get increased levels of inflammation in the body. Number two, their mood and their motivation to work dips.
Wow.
All right. Number three, they socially withdraw. All right, so what's going on here? Basically what I've just told you is that when they inject this E. coli type stuff, which I, by the way, want to unpack that in a quick moment. When they inject this E. coli based stuff called lipopolysaccharide, it basically activates inflammation, which affects their mood, and it also makes them socially withdrawn. And they think that what's happening is that the body is starting to shut down to preserve energy because it needs to fight the infection. So that's number one.
So it's going to slow itself down. It's not going to have the energy to talk to people or be motivated.
100%. Mm-hmm. And then they socially withdraw. Why would they socially withdraw? We're social creatures. We come from living in tribes of people, right? And you want to protect one another. If you're sick, you don't want to pass that on to someone else. So when you feel sick, there's this natural inclination to socially withdraw.
To get away. Interesting.
To protect the others.
Now, is this injection through this study, is that causation or is it, I guess, correlation? I guess, what is it, the difference between, like, did it cause them, the microbiome, to be depressed? Or is it part of the correlation of it? It could be something else that is causing that.
Okay, so we have these studies where there's correlation. Uh-huh. You have a group of people with major depression, and you study their microbiome, and you discover that their microbiome is damaged.
Yes.
Okay, they have what we call dysbiosis, or a leaky gut, right? Now, what's causing what? That's the question, right? Because there's a correlation, but you can't prove that the microbiome caused the depression, or similarly, you can't prove that the depression caused the microbiome change.
Yes.
Right? So then it raises the question, how do we then prove this? Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of ways that you prove this through interventions. And when you take this lipopolysaccharide, basically what you're recreating is what happens when a person has a damaged gut.
Interesting.
Because when you have a damaged gut, those microbes, they live inside the tube of the intestine. And as we discussed at the very beginning of the show, that tube is outside of our body. We have a single layer of cells called the gut epithelium that basically protect us. Because on the other side of that epithelial layer is 60 to 70% of our immune cells.
Wow.
Okay. So the immune system's there to protect us on the other side, and this single layer of cells, it's like the wall of our castle. And when our gut breaks down, when our microbes are damaged, when we don't have enough anti-inflammatory short-chain fatty acids, you start to see this gut barrier breakdown. Mm-hmm. We get what people may call leaky gut. And what leaks is the lipopolysaccharide. This lipopolysaccharide that they were injecting in this study, basically what they were recreating, they were not recreating an infection. They were recreating chronic inflammation.
Interesting.
That comes from a damaged gut.
Wow. So when you have inflammation, because your gut is out of whack or is not healthy, it's going to cause you in some ways to feel lower energy, anxiety, depression, or some type of, I guess, symptom that doesn't cause you to be your best self, is what I'm saying.
100%. And I think that these can exist on an entire spectrum, right? This could be a bad day.
Yes.
Right. But it could also be something that is more chronic and clinical, such as major depression.
Yes.
And like for me personally, like this is where my personal journey started, was that I was in a bad place with my own health.
Really?
And one of the issues that I had was I was depressed.
Really?
Yeah. And I just wanted to be by myself.
And this was when you were in medical school, before or after?
So I was in my gastroenterology training. I was in the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. If you looked at me on paper, you thought that everything was perfect. Yet there I was laying under a blanket in a dark room watching reality television.
Wow. Like all of us do when we're depressed. It's like, I've been there. Wow.
Below deck, baby.
Below deck. That was your drug of choice. So this was when? How many years ago was this?
This was 12 years ago.
12 years ago.
Yeah,
so you're in medical school.
I graduated medical school in 2006. So we're talking about roughly 2012 now.
Okay.
So I was a board certified internal medicine doctor. I'd finished my internal medicine training. Was the chief resident at Northwestern.
Wow.
And then I moved on to the University of North Carolina. I was on a grant from the NIH. And I was studying both at the School of Public Health, which is like one of the top 3 schools of public health in the country. I was doing that and working during the day as a gastroenterologist in the hospital. And I was miserable.
Wow.
And my life was in a bad place. I also had high blood pressure, high cholesterol. From a mood perspective, tons of anxiety, high levels of depression. Again, like I just wanted to lay in a dark room by myself under a blanket and be left alone. That's all I wanted to do.
But you had made it. You were at the top of your field. You were an expert. You were, leading a hospital in the department. So why do you think you were sick, even though you were a doctor?
All I know is this, that I did not want my own medicine in that moment.
Oh. The things you were prescribing to others.
The things that was prescribed to others and that I had been trained by great doctors to do, I didn't want that in that moment.
Wow.
And so the tables had turned. Now I'm the patient. And I needed something to help me. And I tried to exercise my way out of this.
So I'm going to work out harder.
I'm a type A.
Right.
So I go hard.
Obsess. Hardcore.
45 minutes of weight training a day.
HIIT training, cardio, yeah.
Jump on the treadmill for either a 5 or a 10K.
Wow.
Or jump in the pool, because I was in North Carolina, and do 100 laps.
Dang, that's intense.
Yes.
It's triathlon training.
I grew stronger, or faster, or whatever athletic measure you want, but I still felt unwell.
Really?
And
Maybe you felt a little bit better, but...
Felt a little bit better, but I really felt unwell.
And you had a big gut.
I had a big gut.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And I needed something to change. And the weird and bizarre thing about it is that I come from a humble place in upstate New York. And I was raised on junk food.
Yeah.
And this is the way I ate for 75% of my life. Mm-hmm. And the food that was glorified in our house, how could that possibly be the cause of my problems?
The food that brought us love and connection and intimacy and fun and play.
Oh, yeah. Get home from school, play some hoops or Mario Kart, fire up the grill, couple dogs, right? Like every day. Yeah.
Summer barbecues. Let's go.
It was fun and I loved it, but it caught up to me.
Wow.
It caught up to me in my early 30s. And so I needed something to change. And the thing that changed for me was that I eventually looked in the mirror. It was actually by meeting my wife, so who, like, here we are, more than 10 years later, we have 4 kids together. But in this moment, we're going on our first date, and she ate very differently than me.
Really?
Yeah, and I had never seen anything.
How
like
does
this.
she eat?
We were in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't have all the diversity back then.
No.
Of foods.
Well, and you look at the menu, and my wife said to the waiter, she pulled him aside and she goes, "Can you get me a plate? And on that plate, put collards and black-eyed peas and okra and some mashed potatoes."
Wow.
All right. And so she had them arrange a plant plate. And I was like, who are you?
Yeah.
What is going on
I
here?
get some steak or chicken or
Yeah, I got my usual pork chop.
Uh-huh.
So, look, I'm not saying that's wrong. What I'm saying is that my diet needed an overhaul, right? There needed to be changes. And seeing that, she opened my mind because she looked amazing, right? She looked amazing. She seemed to be healthy, have everything going for her, and it seemed to be effortless. And here I am grinding out an hour and a half of exercise every day.
With a gut still.
With a gut still.
Wow.
Right? What is going on?
Why'd she go on a date with you? No.
So I have no clue. I have no clue. The sun shines on a dog's, So anyway, and it but it was enough to open my mind. And so there was this one day where I was going to go to Hardee's and get my usual $5 deal where they can get you like 2,500 calories for $5.
So bad.
It's
tastes
so
amazing
bad,
in the
so
moment.
Good.
Yeah.
For about 2 seconds, you feel great.
Then you feel sick.
And then you just want to get on some sweats and lay on the couch and make weird noises.
Yeah.
So So anyway, instead, I went home. Look, I'm a single guy in my 30s. I am not going to cook a gourmet meal, right? So I pulled out a blender and I threw a bunch of stuff in there, and that worked. And I made like a 40-ounce smoothie, and I instantly felt like something that had been missing from my life was in that cup. And it made me, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when you feel really unwell, you just want to feel better.
Yes.
And so that made me feel better. And when that happens, it's enough to make you say, well, I want to feel that way again. Mm-hmm. And so I came back the next day and I did it again. And that started the process for me of changing my diet. And once I started to change my diet, the weight melted off my body.
Really?
My confidence, because I had extremely low self-esteem.
But you were in the top of your field as a medical doctor and GI and running a hospital division and
didn't matter.
All the degrees and
you could shower me with the degrees and the awards and all these things, and I felt good for a day, and then I went back to feeling like trash.
Why do you think you felt so insecure or low self-esteem?
I think that the way that we feel about ourselves is affected by what's going on inside of us.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
I absolutely do. I think it's more than just like there are labels that we can apply, whether or not a person has a clinical condition, major depression, generalized anxiety disorder, whatever you want it to be. But there are also aspects of who we are that are very human that maybe we don't have a label to apply to it, but we all experience it, right? And that is self-esteem, and that is energy levels,
yes,
and things of this variety. And I was in a dark place. And so anyway, making that change completely radically transformed my health. And because I had that moment, I'm a medical doctor and I care a lot. And so I felt like I have no choice. I have to bring this into the clinic. And so I started bringing this into the clinic to treat my patients. And I saw radical transformations among people with irritable bowel syndrome and acid reflux and Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. I see these radical transformations. And you get to a point, I eventually got to a point in 2016 where I was like, this story, like people deserve to hear this. And it should not be pre-required that you come to see Dr. B as your doctor in order to hear this story. You should be able to hear this no matter where you are. And that's what motivated me to get out there and start doing this.
Wow, man.